Have you ever noticed how much room other people take up in your head? Not the people you love, necessarily, but the audience. The neighbors, the former colleagues, the people from high school you haven't spoken to in a decade. We spend an exhausting amount of energy narrating our lives for people who aren't even watching. We carry their potential judgments like a heavy coat in the middle of summer, sweating under the pressure of opinions that haven't even been voiced. We rehearse conversations that will never happen, defending our choices to ghosts. We explain our career moves to people who don't care about our success. And we justify our joy to people who aren't even present to witness it. This weight is subtle at first. It starts as a small consideration, a "what will they think?" and grows into a massive, invisible architecture that dictates every move we make. We check our phones to see how our day looks to someone else before we've even decided how it feels to us. We edit our words, we soften our ambitions, and we tuck away our oddities just to make sure we don't disrupt someone else's comfort. It's like living in a house where all the furniture is arranged for guests who never show up, while you're left sitting on the floor in the corner. You are the owner of your life, yet you are living like a tenant who is afraid to hang a picture on the wall for fear of losing the security deposit. This constant orientation toward the outside world isn't just a social habit. It is a fundamental loss of the self. We become so entangled in the expectations of the collective that we forget we have an internal world that requires our attention. We are so focused on the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society, that we begin to believe the mask is the person. Carl Jung deeply understood this struggle between the individual and the crowd. He once observed, "The pendulum of the mind alternates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." When we are weighed down by others, we lose that natural rhythm. We stop listening to the sense of our own intuition and start vibrating at the frequency of the nonsense provided by public opinion. We become paralyzed by the fear of being misunderstood, forgetting that being understood by people who don't know the real you is a hollow victory anyway. We carry the weight of expectations like a backpack full of stones we've picked up along the way. Some stones were given to us by people who meant well, and some were forced upon us by those who wanted us to fit a specific mold. But regardless of where they came from, we are the ones who are tired. We are the ones with the aching shoulders and the shortened breath. We have been conditioned to believe that carrying this weight is a sign of being a good person, a responsible adult, or a team player. But at some point, you have to ask, who is this weight serving? The weight of other people manifests in the way we hold our bodies, the way we hesitate before speaking, and the way we second-guess our most intuitive impulses. It's the invisible tether that pulls you back when you want to take a leap into the unknown. We worry about the cringe factor, the social fallout, or the quiet whispers behind our backs. We have been trained to value the comfort of the collective over the integrity of the individual. We treat our own lives as a public utility, something that everyone else has a right to weigh in on, rather than a private garden that requires our specific, personal care. Imagine, for a moment, what your life would look like if you suddenly became invisible to everyone else's judgment. If every person you've ever met suddenly lost the ability to form an opinion about you. What would you wear tomorrow? What would you do with your afternoon? Would you still be pursuing the same goals? For most of us, the answer is a jarring realization of just how much we've compromised. The weight of other people doesn't just slow us down. It changes our destination entirely. It pushes us toward the center of the bell curve, where it's safe and predictable, but where nothing truly original or authentic can survive. This psychological burden is a form of self-abandonment. Every time we prioritize someone else's imagined reaction over our own actual feeling, we are telling ourselves that we don't matter. We are reinforcing the idea that our internal world is secondary to the external landscape. Over time, this creates a profound sense of resentment, not necessarily toward others, but toward the life we've built. We look around at our surroundings and realize that nothing here actually resonates with who we are. Jung warned us about the danger of this external obsession when he said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." The weight of other people is simply the world telling you who to be. It is the noise of 1,000 voices trying to drown out the one voice that actually matters. When you carry that weight, you aren't a person. You are a composite of everyone else's requirements. You are a script written by a committee of people who aren't even invested in your happiness. Reclaiming yourself begins with the decision to drop those stones, one by one, and face the terrifying, beautiful reality of your own unobserved life. But how do we stop carrying that weight? We often think the answer is to just be ourselves, as if that's a simple switch we can flip. But the truth is more complicated. To stop living for the audience, you first have to realize exactly what you've been sacrificing to keep them entertained. You have to look at the receipts and see the actual price you've paid for your social safety. You have to look at the quiet, steady erosion of your own identity that happens every time you choose to be likable instead of being real. When you're constantly looking outward for a signal on how to act, you lose the frequency of your own voice. Think about the last time you made a big decision. Was it because it felt like the right evolution of your character? Or was it because it was the logical next step that wouldn't require you to explain yourself to anyone? We choose paths that sound impressive at dinner parties, but leave us hollow by Monday morning. We stay in situations that have long since dried up because we're afraid of the optics of being alone or starting over. We trade our authenticity for a sense of belonging that is, in reality, quite fragile. This is the hidden tax of a performative life. You end up owning a lot of things, but none of them are you. We're so afraid of being seen as too much or selfish that we become experts at being nothing at all. We become mirrors. But a mirror has no substance of its own. It only exists to reflect what's standing in front of it. If you spend your whole life being a mirror, what happens when you're finally alone in a room? When the lights go down and the audience leaves, who is left? Most of us are terrified of that silence because we haven't spent a single moment getting to know the person inhabiting our own skin. Carl Jung spoke of this split between the persona, the social mask, and the true self. He once cautioned, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." By focusing on the performance, we essentially forfeit that privilege. We trade the vast, complex reality of our inner world for a small, two-dimensional character that others can easily digest. This performance is a thief. It steals the present moment. You can't be fully present in a conversation if half of your brain is monitoring how your posture looks or how your laugh sounds to the person across the table. You can't be fully immersed in a creative project if you're already anticipating the criticism of someone who hasn't even seen it yet. You become a spectator of your own life, standing in the back of the room, watching yourself perform. This disconnection is where the feeling of meaninglessness often takes root. It's not that life has no meaning. It's that you aren't actually the one living it. The cost isn't just a lack of joy. It's a profound depletion of energy. Think of how much cognitive power it takes to maintain a version of yourself that is slightly different for every person you meet. You are one person for your boss, another for your parents, and yet another for your friends. You are constantly recalibrating, shifting your vocabulary, suppressing your opinions, and monitoring your tone. It is like running dozens of heavy applications in the background of a computer. Eventually, the system starts to lag. You feel tired, not because you're doing too much, but because you are being too many people at once. Jung understood that this exhaustion is often the precursor to a deeper crisis. He said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." But when you are performing, you aren't choosing who to become. You are letting the audience choose for you. You are reacting to what happened to you. The expectations, the criticisms, the societal norms, rather than acting from your own center. We pay a price in our relationships too. When you lead with a performance, you attract people who love the character, not the actor. You build a life on a foundation of agreeableness, and then wonder why you feel so lonely, even when you're surrounded by people. True intimacy is impossible when you're wearing a mask, because the person they love isn't actually there. You end up trapped in a part of your own making. Consider the dreams you've quietly buried because they didn't fit the script. Maybe it was a career in a field that isn't considered prestigious, or a lifestyle choice that would make your social circle uncomfortable. We tell ourselves we're being realistic or mature, but often we're just being obedient to an audience that doesn't even have our best interests at heart. We sacrifice our genius for the sake of being normal. We trade our spark for a lukewarm sense of social security. But a life lived in the middle of the road is rarely a life of fulfillment. Every time you say yes, when your whole body is screaming no, you pay a piece of your integrity. Every time you laugh at a joke you find offensive, or nod in agreement with an opinion you don't hold, you are training your brain to ignore your own truth. You are teaching your intuition that its input is not welcome here. Eventually, that inner voice stops speaking altogether. This is the most tragic cost of the performance, the loss of the only compass you were ever given. Without it, you are just drifting, following the currents of whatever social group you happen to be in, never realizing that you've lost the ability to steer your own ship. The performance also prevents genuine growth. To grow, you have to be willing to be a beginner. You have to be willing to look foolish and to make mistakes. But the performer can't afford to look foolish. The performer has an image to maintain. So, we stick to what we're already good at. We stay in our comfort zones because the risk of a public failure is too high. We become stagnant, polished versions of our younger selves, never reaching the depths of what we could have become if we had only been willing to be seen as imperfect. Eventually, the mask becomes so heavy that it starts to crack. This is often what people call a midlife crisis or a breakdown, but in reality, it is often a breakthrough. It is the real self finally smashing through the layers of performance, demanding to be seen. It is an expensive moment, often involving the dismantling of the life you've built, but it is also the first moment of true freedom. The question is, do you wait for the mask to break on its own, or do you have the courage to take it off yourself? The realization of what this performance has cost you is often a heavy, somber moment. It's the feeling of standing in a crowded room and realizing you are utterly alone because no one there is actually talking to you. They are talking to the version of you that you've carefully curated. But this grief is also a doorway. Once you acknowledge that the mask is too heavy to carry, you find yourself standing at the edge of a new territory. You are finally ready to turn around and face the person you've been running away from for a lifetime. There is a shift that happens when you finally decide to turn that gaze inward. It's not about being cold or unkind to others. It's about finally showing up for the one person you've been ghosting for years, yourself. It is a radical act of reclamation. Most of our lives are spent in a state of outward-facing awareness, constantly scanning the environment for threats, rewards, or social cues. To turn that attention 180 degrees and look at your own internal landscape is, for many of us, the most foreign experience imaginable. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside sleeps. Who looks inside awakes." This awakening isn't a sudden, blissful burst of light. Usually, it's a quiet, slightly uncomfortable realization that you have preferences you've suppressed and curiosities you've ignored because they didn't fit the brand you created for the world. To be obsessed with yourself in this context means to become a student of your own soul. It means asking, what do I actually like when no one is watching? And having the courage to listen to the answer, even if that answer makes you realize you've been heading in the wrong direction for years. When you begin to look inside, you encounter the parts of yourself that were deemed unacceptable by the audience. Maybe it's a specific sensitivity, a strange creative urge, or a need for solitude that you've always branded as antisocial. In the past, you might have pushed these things away to stay awake to the needs of others. But looking inside requires you to stop sleeping through your own life. It requires you to sit with the parts of yourself that are messy, unpolished, and intensely human. This process of meeting yourself is like walking into a house you've owned for decades, but have never actually lived in. You walk through the rooms and find boxes of talents you never opened, windows with views you never looked through, and perhaps some dust and decay in the corners that you've been too afraid to clean. It is a daunting task, but it is the only way to become a whole person. We often spend our lives trying to be good or perfect according to a social script, but there is a much deeper calling that we tend to ignore. As Jung famously noted, "I would rather be whole than good." Being good is often just another word for being compliant. It means you've followed the rules of the performance so well that you've successfully erased your own edges to fit into a box. But being whole is different. Wholeness requires you to integrate everything: your flaws, your secret ambitions, and your unique quirks. When you become obsessed with yourself, you stop trying to prune away the parts of your personality that don't look pretty to the neighbors. You start to realize that those very parts might be the roots of your greatest strengths. Meeting the person you've ignored means confronting the reality that you are a multifaceted being, not a flat image. It involves acknowledging that you have a shadow, those parts of your character that you've hidden even from yourself because they didn't align with who you were supposed to be. To be obsessed with yourself is to finally give those parts a voice. It's to realize that your anger might be misplaced passion, or your sadness might be the result of years of ignored creativity. Think of the things you do when you are completely alone, the way you hum to yourself, the specific way you organize your space, the thoughts that wander through your mind when there is no one there to judge them. This is the you that has been waiting for an invitation to the table. Meeting this person requires a level of honesty that can be brutal. You have to admit that you might not actually like the things you've been pretending to like. You have to admit that you might be bored by the things you're supposed to find exciting. This meeting isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong conversation. It means checking in with yourself before you check in with the world. It means valuing your own opinion of your day more than the feedback you receive from a screen. When you finally meet the person you've ignored, you realize that the weight of other people was only heavy because you had no internal structure to support yourself. By looking inside and awaking, you begin to build that structure, brick by honest brick. You realize that the person you were so afraid to meet is actually your greatest ally. All those years you spent seeking validation from the outside, you were essentially looking for someone to tell you that you were allowed to exist. But once you meet yourself, you realize that the permission was already there, signed by you, waiting to be found in the silence of your own heart. When the focus shifts from the audience to the self, the atmosphere of your life changes. It's like a radio station that's been static for years, finally finding a clear signal. The beauty of internal focus isn't in the absence of others, but in the presence of yourself. You begin to realize that you are not a project to be managed or a product to be sold. You are a living, breathing reality to be experienced. When you shift your focus, the world doesn't end. The people who truly matter don't leave. In fact, something better happens. You stop being a background character in your own life. You start choosing the books you actually want to read, the way you want to spend your Tuesday nights, and the goals that make your heart race, even if they look boring or strange to everyone else. You start to realize that selfishness is often just a label people use for those they can no longer manipulate. When you stop asking for permission, you find that you never actually needed it. This isn't about vanity. Vanity is still about the audience. It's about wanting to be admired. This is about intimito. It's about knowing your own rhythms, knowing when you need silence, knowing what triggers your frustration, and knowing what makes you feel alive. When you are obsessed with your own growth, you stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. You become so fascinated by your own potential that the noise of the world starts to fade into a dull, unimportant hum. You are finally building something that belongs to you, a sanctuary where you can exist without the need for performance or apology. Carl Jung saw this inward turn as the essential task of a person's life. He noted, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When you have an internal focus, you stop reacting to the world with defensiveness and start reacting with curiosity. If someone judges you, instead of carrying the weight of their opinion, you look at why their judgment sparked a reaction in you. You use the outside world as a tool for self-discovery rather than a courtroom for self-judgment. The beauty of this is that you become unshakable. Your peace no longer depends on the weather of other people's moods. Think of the clarity that comes when you no longer have to poll a committee before you decide how you feel. There is a profound elegance in a life that is directed from within. You move with a different kind of grace because you aren't constantly checking your reflection in the eyes of others. You begin to appreciate the subtle textures of your own existence, the way the light hits your room in the afternoon, the specific satisfaction of a job well done, the quiet thrill of a thought that is entirely your own. This internal focus allows you to cultivate a secret garden of sorts. In a world that demands we broadcast every thought and share every milestone, there is immense power in having things that are just for you. You realize that your value isn't a stock price that fluctuates based on public interest. It is a fixed, inherent quality. Jung believed that this process of becoming one's own person, what he called individuation, was the path to true meaning. He once stated, "The individual is the only reality." When you focus on the individual, on yourself, you are finally dealing with reality instead of the shadows of social expectations. You start to see beauty in your own contradictions. You see the beauty in being a work in progress. You no longer feel the need to rush toward a finish line that someone else drew. Instead, you savor the process of unfolding, You become the observer and the observed, the creator and the creation. This is the ultimate freedom. To be so deeply rooted in your own being that you can finally enjoy the world without being consumed by it. As you dwell in this internal focus, your energy begins to return to you. The power you once gave away to critics and strangers starts to pool in your own heart. You find that you have more to give to the people you love, not because you should, but because you are operating from a place of abundance rather than depletion. The beauty of being obsessed with yourself is that it eventually makes you a more grounded, honest, and compassionate presence for everyone else. But that's just a byproduct. The real prize is the relationship you've finally forged with the person in the mirror. But as beautiful as that internal focus sounds, the path to reaching it is rarely a straight line through a sunlit field. To move from the comfort of the crowd to the clarity of the self, you have to pass through a wilderness. It's a space where the old rules no longer apply, but the new ones haven't been written yet. It's the stage where the weight of your history tries to pull you back, and the silence of your new life feels more like a threat than a gift. This is the crossing, the necessary friction between who you were told to be and who you actually are. It won't feel easy at first. There's a specific kind of guilt that comes with setting boundaries or choosing your own path. You might feel like you're breaking a law you never signed. You might feel a sense of loss as you let go of the versions of yourself that were designed to please others. But that guilt is just the sound of your old habits trying to pull you back into the performance. It is the friction of growth. It is the weight of the old self being shed so the new self can breathe. When you stop playing the role people expect, they may react with confusion or even anger. And sitting with that discomfort is the price of your liberation. Jung noted, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." It's terrifying because once you accept yourself, you can no longer blame others for your unhappiness. You can't point to your circumstances or your social circle and say, "I'm like this because of them." When you focus entirely on your own growth, you take back the wheel. You realize that your healing is your responsibility, and that realization is the most liberating yet daunting thing in the world. You are no longer waiting for permission to be happy. You are no longer waiting for an apology to move on. You are simply moving. You are no longer a victim of the audience's whims. You are the architect of your own experience. During this transition, you will likely encounter a profound sense of loneliness. This isn't the loneliness of being unwanted. It's the loneliness of being unobserved. When you stop performing for the audience, the applause stops. The feedback loop you've relied on for decades to tell you if you're doing okay suddenly goes silent. You are left in a void where the only validation available is the validation you give yourself. This is where most people turn back. They mistake this silence for failure, not realizing that it is actually the birth of autonomy. It is the moment where you stop being a moon reflecting someone else's light and start becoming a sun. You will have to face the parts of yourself that are uncoordinated and raw. When you stop following the script, you will stumble. You will say the wrong thing. You will realize that you don't actually know how to spend a Saturday afternoon without a social obligation to guide you. This clumsiness is a sign of life. It's the same way a person feels when they try to use their non-dominant hand. It's awkward because it's new, not because it's wrong. Jung often spoke about the necessity of this struggle, observing, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The pain comes from the death of the false self." Every time you choose your own peace over someone else's expectation, a small part of that false self dies. It can feel like a mourning process. You might grieve the person who was the life of the party, or the person who was always dependable, even if those roles were exhausting you. You are clearing the land so that something more stable can be built. This transition is less about adding new features to your personality and more about stripping away the layers of paint that were applied by other people's brushes. You will also find that your relationships begin to shift. Some people were only in your life because they benefited from your performance. When the mask comes off, they may find they don't recognize the person underneath. Or worse, they don't find that person useful anymore. This is a painful but necessary pruning. The difficult transition teaches you that you would rather be disliked for who you are than loved for who you are not. It forces you to find the courage to be unpopular in the eyes of the world so that you can be honest in your own eyes. As you navigate this middle ground, you'll find that your sense of time changes. The frantic pace of the performance, the constant need to keep up and stay relevant, gives way to a slower, more deliberate rhythm. You start to move at the speed of your own soul. This can feel like a loss of productivity to the outside world, but it is actually an accumulation of power. You are no longer leaking energy in 1,000 different directions to satisfy 1,000 different people. You are consolidating your strength. You are becoming a person who cannot be easily swayed because you have walked through the fire of your own self-doubt and come out the other side. The transition ends not when the world starts agreeing with you, but when you stop needing them to. It ends when you can look at the audience and feel a sense of calm indifference rather than a desperate need for approval. You realize that the difficult transition was never about changing the world's opinion of you. It was about changing your opinion of yourself. You are no longer an actor waiting for a cue. You are the writer, the director, and the only critic whose review truly matters. To reach the depth and scale of this transformation, we must look at the structural change that occurs within. Before we can embrace being forgotten by the world, we must become the primary architects of our own existence. We must move from the reactive state of a performer to the proactive state of a creator. Think of your life as a structure. For years, you've let everyone else draw the blueprints. They told you where the walls should go, what color the rooms should be, and how high the ceiling ought to reach to remain appropriate in the eyes of the neighborhood. But you are the one who has to live inside it. Being obsessed with yourself is the process of tearing down those external blueprints and starting over with your own hands. It's about deciding that you would rather live in a small, honest shack of your own making than a grand palace built by someone else's expectations. This process of self-discovery is a long-form conversation between your conscious mind and your deepest instincts. It's a series of small no's to the world and big yeses to your own intuition. It's choosing the hobby that makes you feel like a child again, even if it doesn't lead to a promotion or social status. It's choosing the quiet evening alone over the social event that leaves you feeling drained and performative. It's the realization that you are allowed to change, to evolve, and even to contradict who you used to be. You are a work in progress, not a finished product on display for public consumption. Carl Jung saw this internal building project as the ultimate goal of human life. He believed that our primary duty was to find our own unique path, separate from the mass psychology of the crowd. He wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." As the architect of your own self, you stop looking for recipes. You stop looking at how other people are building their lives and trying to copy their floor plans. You realize that their success might be your pinch. You start to measure the height of your ceilings by the reach of your own soul, not by the standards of the industry or the traditions of your family. You begin to value the unconventional corners of your personality because you realize those are the spaces where your true creativity lives. Building yourself requires a relentless focus on the present moment. You cannot build a stable house if you are constantly looking over your shoulder to see if the neighbors approve of the foundation. You have to be obsessed with the quality of the brick you are laying right now. This obsession is what allows you to move past the superficial. You start to care less about how the house looks from the street and more about how the air feels inside the rooms. You care about whether the space allows you to breathe, to create, and to rest. Jung emphasized that this journey toward self-architecture is what makes us truly human. He noted, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." When you first start tearing down the old blueprints, your life might look like a construction site, messy, loud, and disorganized. Others might look at the debris and call it a breakdown, but you know that it is a breakthrough. You are finding the secret order beneath the chaos of your old, performed life. You are discovering the cosmos of your own character. You are learning that your perceived flaws are often just the raw materials for your most important rooms. Being your own architect means you stop seeking advice from people who don't have to live with the consequences of your choices. You realize that most people give advice based on their own fears and their own limited blueprints. When you are obsessed with yourself, you consult your own internal compass first. You become the final authority on what is right for you. This doesn't mean you become arrogant. It means you become responsible. You accept that if the roof leaks, it's your job to fix it. But if the view is beautiful, it belongs entirely to you. This section of the journey is where you find your flow. When you are no longer trying to fit into a pre-made mold, your energy is finally freed up to do the work you were actually meant to do. You find that you have a specific genius, not necessarily in the sense of high intelligence, but in the sense of a unique spirit that only you possess. By being obsessed with nurturing that spirit, you become a light for others, not because you are trying to be, but because a person who is truly themselves is the rarest and most beautiful thing in the world. As the structure of your new self takes shape, you notice that the weight of other people has finally lifted. You have built something so solid and so aligned with your truth that the winds of public opinion can no longer shake the walls. You are no longer looking for a home in the hearts of others. You have built a home within yourself. And it is from this place of absolute internal security that you are finally ready to step into the ultimate liberation, the freedom of being forgotten. To truly stand as the architect of your own life, you must pass through one final gate. You have to learn to sit in the stillness of your own company without the urge to reach for a distraction or a witness. This is the stage of internal reconciliation, where you stop being your own harshest critic and start becoming your own sanctuary. We often confuse being alone with being lonely, but they are entirely different states of existence. Loneliness is a hunger for the gaze of the other, a feeling that you are incomplete without someone there to validate your presence. Solitude, however, is the practice of being fully present with yourself. It is the sanctuary you build once you've stopped performing. When you are obsessed with yourself, you realize that your own company is not a consolation prize. It is the destination. In this sanctuary, you learn to listen to the quiet parts of your mind. When the noise of the world's expectations is dialed down, you start to hear the subtle murmurs of your intuition. You begin to notice the small things that bring you genuine peace, the way a certain song resonates in your chest, the physical relief of a long walk, or the satisfaction of solving a problem that only matters to you. You are no longer killing time until someone else arrives to make you feel real. You are the source of your own reality. Carl Jung recognized that this internal relationship is the bedrock of a stable life. He observed, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But most of us spend our lives trying to react to everyone else before we have even established our own chemical signature. If you don't know who you are in the quiet of your own sanctuary, every person you meet will change you in ways you didn't choose. You will be a reactive substance, constantly shifting to match the environment. By being obsessed with your own internal state, you stabilize your core. You become a person of substance who can enter the world without being dissolved by it. Building this sanctuary requires a ruthless protection of your energy. You start to realize that every social obligation you say yes to out of guilt is a brick stolen from your own house. You begin to value your empty time as your most productive time, because that is when the integration happens. That is when the lessons of the day turn into the wisdom of the self. You stop feeling the need to broadcast your life because the experience itself is enough. The audience in your head is finally dismissed, and for the first time, you are living for a market of one. Jung once noted, "Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. For many of us, the narcotic is external validation. We are addicted to the hit of someone else's approval, the high of being seen as successful or desirable. Solitude is the detoxification process. It is the uncomfortable period where you have to learn to sit with your own boredom, your own anxiety, and your own unedited thoughts until the craving for an audience fades. Once that addiction is broken, you find a level of power that no one can take away from you. You are no longer a beggar for attention. You are the king of your own inner world. This sanctuary is where you discover your true values, not the values you were taught in school, or the values that are currently trending on social media, but the values that are hardwired into your nervous system. You find out what you are willing to stand for when no one is there to cheer for you. You find out what you truly love when there is no one there to be impressed by your taste. This is the internal focus brought to its highest expression. It is the point where you are so deeply at home in your own skin that the rest of the world becomes a background set rather than a judgmental jury. Once you have mastered the sanctuary of solitude, the transition to being forgotten isn't a tragedy. It's the ultimate reward. You realize that being forgotten by the world simply means you are no longer their property. You have reclaimed your life from the public domain. You are finally free to exist for your own sake. The ultimate goal of this journey isn't to become a hermit or to live in total isolation. It is to reach a state of internal sovereignty where the noise of the world no longer dictates the music of your life. When you stop fearing the silence, you find the greatest liberation of all, the realization that you no longer need to be a main character in everyone else's story. There is a profound, almost startling relief in realizing that most people aren't actually thinking about you. We live our lives under the crushing assumption that we are being scrutinized, that our mistakes are recorded, our outfits are critiqued, and our life choices are being debated in the minds of others. But the truth is much kinder. Everyone else is far too caught up in their own performances, their own anxieties, and their own audiences to truly notice yours. We think we are being watched, but we are all just sitting in a dark theater, too worried about our own lines to notice if the person next to us missed theirs. Once you accept that you aren't the center of the world's gaze, you are finally free to be the center of your own. The spotlight we so desperately chased was actually a cage. It restricted our movement and demanded a specific kind of perfection. In the shadows of being forgotten, there is room to breathe. There is room to fail without it becoming a public record. There is room to change your mind, to grow, and to explore paths that lead nowhere but to your own personal satisfaction. Carl Jung recognized that this withdrawal from the public eye was essential for the soul's development. He noted, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. Being forgotten means the world has stopped telling you who you are. It means the labels, the expectations, and the shoulds have finally fallen away because the audience has moved on to someone else. This freedom allows you to live a life of quiet quality. You start to value the experiences that cannot be captured in a photo or described in a status update. You find joy in the secret progress you make, the way you handled a difficult emotion today, the way you've learned to forgive yourself for a past version of your character, the way you can now sit in a room alone and feel a sense of warmth. These are the milestones that no one will ever applaud, yet they are the only ones that actually change the texture of your existence. Jung's final wisdom on this matter is perhaps his most hauntingly beautiful. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You are choosing, right now, to become the person you were before the world told you who to be. You are choosing to let the audience go home so that you can finally live. Being obsessed with yourself in this final stage means being so deeply rooted in your own truth that you don't even notice the silence of the crowd. You have spent long enough being a reflection of what others wanted to see. The play is over, the theater is empty, and the lights are finally off. Now, in the quiet, you can finally begin to be the light itself.